Okay, so welcome to the second part of the Craigslist scraping Python script that we're writing, and I'm going to leave a link to the first part of this video in the description just in case you missed that. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to go ahead and start off with is we're going to write a function that's just going to allow us to open up a web browser. So in this case, we'll be using Mozilla Firefox. We're going to be opening up a browser, and then we're going to be navigating to the URL that we constructed here as part of our class. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this test function. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the call to the test function down there. And then in the constructor, I'm going to add a couple more things. I'm going to add a class variable, which I'll call driver. So I'll say self.driver, and I'll set this equal to webdriver.firefox. So what is this? Well, if we go up here, there's something that we're importing from Selenium, this WebDriver part of the Selenium module. And there's a function in there called Firefox, and that essentially is going to open up a instance of Firefox, and that's going to be essentially the browser session that we're going to use to navigate to the website that we constructed here, the URL that we constructed here, and then open that up. And this driver or browser object is going to essentially allow us to kind of navigate around in that page, in this case to extract the information that we're after. So this is going to be kind of the instantiation of the browser that we're going to use for the remainder of the video. So another thing that I'm going to set here in the class, actually I'll get around to that later. Let's actually go ahead and define a function which will just be responsible for loading up a browser, Firefox browser, and then navigating to the URL that we defined as the class variable. So we'll say def load Craigslist URL. This will take a parameter self, and in this function what we're going to do is we're going to say self.driver.get, and then we're going to pass in self.url. So what this is doing is we're making use of the driver variable that we defined in our class constructor, and then there's a .get method that's associated with this variable that we defined as this webdriver.firefox object. And what that does is it opens up a Firefox browser, and then it navigates to a URL that's specified as a string. That self.url is specified up here as a class variable. So all that's going to do is it's just going to navigate to that website that we defined up there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have a try and except statement. And essentially the reason for this is because in order for us to grab the content that we're after, namely the listings that are going to be represented to us as we navigate to this website, the page may not load instantaneously. So we want to make sure that we have the elements that we're after. We want to make sure they're loaded, because if our script tries to extract those elements before they're actually loaded, the script is just going to fail. It's going to try to extract elements. It's going to operate quicker than the website can actually operate to load the page, and it's going to say, I don't know what you want me to grab. And that's because the page didn't load fast enough. So we want to build in sort of a delay in some ways, and that's going to be built into this try except statement. So we're going to say try, and then we're going to define a variable that we'll call wait. And this is going to be equal to WebDriver wait, and it's going to take two arguments. We'll say self.driver, and also something that we have not defined yet, which we'll call self.delay. Self.delay in this case will just be a class variable that we'll define right below the driver, and that's just going to be equal to a number. And this number is just going to be a certain amount of seconds that we want to wait for the elements to load. So this can be pretty variable, like you might have a slow connection and this might not be high enough, or it might be a little bit too generous if you have a very fast connection. I'm just going to set it at 3, since that seemed to, after experimenting with different numbers, that seemed to give pretty optimal results. So if you find that it's not loading fast enough, you may have to change this number. So what we're going to do in this try except statement is define a variable called wait, and we're going to set it equal to WebDriver wait, and this is imported up here. So that's going to be, that's what we're importing again from Selenium, and it takes the driver and also the amount that we want to wait. So underneath that, I'm going to say wait.until. So this is a function that's implemented from this Selenium module, this until, not unit, until. And in this until function, what we're going to do is we're going to say ec.presence of element located. And then inside of this thing, I'm going to explain this after I write it out. I'm going to write by.id and then search form. So I'm going to explain what is going on in this line because it's probably not immediately clear. So let's break this down. We define this variable wait up here. Part of the function of this object that we defined is this until. So we're waiting until something is loaded. What are we waiting until is loaded? Well, we're waiting to the presence of some object. So this other thing that we imported up here, this expected condition, we're waiting until this expected condition presents itself on the website that we're trying to scrape content from. So there's this expected condition dot presence of element located, and essentially what this is going to do is it's going to wait until a specific element loads on the page. What element loads on the page? We're searching for, in this case, an ID. So if let's go back to the browser, and let's actually just right click anywhere and say inspect. So depending on whatever browser you're using, it could be inspect, it could be view source. If you're on Chrome, this is kind of nice. As you highlight over certain objects here, it corresponds to where those are located in the browser itself. So what I want to do is, you can see that there's this form ID, this search form, and basically what I want to do is I don't want to extract anything from the web page of the URL that we've built until that website is actually loaded in our browser. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, Selenium, wait until you can actually see this ID load on the page. If you see a form on the page that corresponds to this search form, then you know the page is loaded and you can continue doing what you're supposed to do. So that's all we're doing there. Let's go back to the code just to clarify. What we're doing is we're searching for something on the page. So you can specify if you're looking for a CSS element or for an ID element, for a class element. So this by dot, and there's some type of argument here that will allow you to specify what type of tag you're looking for. And then in this second argument, you're saying, okay, you're looking for an ID. What ID are you looking for? Well, in this case, if we open this back up, we're looking for the let's see where to go here, the form ID, the ID with an ID of search form. So once that's loaded, we should be good and we can extract the elements on the page that we're after. Let me just minimize that. So that's all that's doing. So if that is successful, then we're going to print out a message which is just going to say page is ready, just so we kind of know that the page is ready to go. And then otherwise we'll have an exception that's going to be caught, and this will be a timeout exception. So this is another thing that we're importing up here as one of the exceptions that Selenium allows us to, that's supported by Selenium, this timeout exception. So what we're going to do here in this exception is we're going to print out a message that says loading took too much time. So if you see this sort of message, you may need to up the delay number of seconds to wait for the page to load. So if you see this message, hopefully we won't see this message, but that could be something that you could try if this doesn't work out for you. So we hopefully should see this page is ready message. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and try to just load the page and load the URL that we constructed. So we should see a Mozilla Firefox browser pop open, which is defined by this thing here, which is part of the class. And then it should navigate to this website. What website is it navigating to? This URL that we constructed here based on the information that we defined down here. And then it's going to wait for that stuff to load up, and we should see a message that says page is ready once about 3 seconds has elapsed and hopefully the elements of the page is loaded. So we're going to go ahead and write that. We're going to say Python Craigslist scraper. We're going to hit enter, and then hopefully we should see pretty much what I described. So we see our browser pop open here. So we've got that, and doesn't seem like it's going to the website. And the reason it's not going to the website is because we did not call this load Craigslist URL function. So that would definitely be the reason why that's not happening. So after we create our scraper object here, we're going to say scraper dot load Craigslist URL. And let's go ahead and try to run that again. So hopefully now we see the browser open up and we see it navigate to the page. Indeed it does. And it loads everything there. And we see this message that says page is ready. So that's what we expected to see. So that's all good. So now we want to get to actually extracting the content that we're after. So let's go ahead and create two functions. Let's call them extract post titles, since that's one of the things that we're after. And I'm going to put a pass there. And then we also want to extract post URLs. So I'm going to put a pass here as well, since we're going to fill in the body of both of these functions. So let's go ahead and just start off with the post titles. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the web page and we're going to kind of look around and see if there's some hints that we can kind of get from this part of the web page here that will allow us to easily extract this stuff. So this is the title of each of the posts. We want to see where this is defined. So a nice thing about Chrome is that if you right-click on an element on a web page and you right-click and say inspect, that will highlight this element and it will highlight where it's used in the code here. So we can look around and we can say, okay, this name, this title corresponds to this link, so it's an href. This href equals quote, that's the link that corresponds to. If you click on this link, that will take you to that page. And we want to see essentially some common elements for each of these things. So if we click on another one, inspect, we've got another element here. So we also have a href, a link, data ID, class result. So there's a few things that are here that might be consistent among all of the items on this page. So let's just keep going. So one thing I noticed too is there is this inside of each of these, if we expand and collapse these little boxes here, these little trees rather, you can see that this row result corresponds to kind of the content of one item. So for instance, this is the link for the image. If you click on the image, that will take you to the same link that if you clicked on this title. So that's kind of interesting. So if you minimize this triangle here, if you minimize that, this result row is a row that corresponds to a particular item. So notice when I highlight over this particular result row, that highlights that item there. If I move that down there, that highlights the next item. So there's kind of some clues. You notice that it's really just kind of a bit of playing around with looking at the code and then seeing kind of what elements pop up here to give you a clue of how you can kind of write a scraper that will take advantage of the content that's available to you on the website. So one big hint that's kind of displaying itself to me is this result row. Each of the items on this page have a class associated with them called result row. So maybe what we want to do is we want to find all of the elements on this page that have this result row class name, and we want to extract all of those elements. So let's go ahead and see how we can do that. So in this extract post titles, what we're going to do is let's define a variable called all posts, and we'll set this equal to self.driver, and we can specify what elements we want to look for. So we can say find elements by. So there's a few things here. So one is there's a function called find element by, which will just give you a single item. There's find elements by, which will return a list for a given query that you're looking for, and then after this underscore here, you can specify what you're searching for, whether it be a CSS object, a class object, or something else, an ID object. You can look for those things as specified in the driver object that we've in the session that we have. So again, we have this driver session that we've built as part of our class. We're in this browser, and we want to find all of the elements on the page that we're on by the class name. And all of this is specified in the Selenium documentation. So if you're curious what else you can search by, I encourage you to consult that documentation. If your specific requirements require you to search for some other type of element on a web page, in this case, we're interested in the class name. So I'm just going to leave it like that. And then what type of class name are we looking for? Let's go back to the web page. We're looking for a class name that has this result-row. So basically what we want to do is we want to find all the elements on this page that have this result-row thing, this class. So we're going to put in here a string, which is going to be result-row. And what that's going to do is that's going to give us a list of Selenium objects, which are going to be all of the elements on the page that have this particular class name. So what we can do is we can actually just print out all post, and we can see what we get. So I'm going to go ahead and go down here and say scraper.extract post titles, and what this is going to do is it's going to create our object as we did before, load the web page, we saw that before, and then now we're going to once the web page is loaded, we're going to extract all of the elements that have a class name result row and see what we get back. We're going to see them in the form of a list here. So we're going to go ahead and write that and give that a run. So let's just see what we get. So this is going to load the browser, navigate to the page, and then we should see some output on the screen. So indeed, we see some output here. So it's printing out a big list of Selenium objects that correspond to the elements that we are interested in. So they don't look like much of anything because they're just telling you what type of object they are, but we're going to want to extract the text of those elements, and that's what we're going to store in a list, and that's what we're going to return in that function. So let's go ahead and do that. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say, let's say post title list. So this is going to be a list that we're going to define right outside of a for loop that we're going to create, which is going to loop through all the posts that we've just extracted from this line here, and it's going to store the text of each of those posts into a list, into this list right here, and then it's going to return that list. So we're going to say for post in all posts. I should call this all posts probably. So for a post in all posts, what we're going to do is we're going to say, well, what we can do first is we can say print post.text, just so we can see what we have as output. But what we really want to do is say post title underscore list dot append, and then we want to append the text of the post. So again, what we saw when we ran this was we saw some objects, Selenium objects, but we want to extract the corresponding text of each of those objects. And the way that you do that is you say dot text. That dot text then is going to extract the text that we're interested in, which is the text of the postings that we want to store in this list. So what we're doing is we're adding those all to the list, and then we're going to return post title list. So we're going to go ahead and save that. And then I'm going to just go ahead and run this again. It's going to loop through all of the Selenium objects that we got from this line up here. It's going to print the text of each of those objects, and then it's going to go ahead and store them into this list that we created up here, which was initially empty, and then it's going to return that list down at line 37. So just to make sure, save it again, and then run it. So let's go ahead and see what we get here. So we should see the browser pop open. We've got the page loading, and then we see here some actual content that is a little bit more human readable. So this is all of the title postings of the stuff that we want. So the query that we had was pretty broad, so there's a lot of stuff there, but we see that we have more human readable titles that exactly is what we're after. So I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of that print statement, because maybe we just want to store it in a list and then process that list later. So actually I'll leave the print statement in. So now what we want to do is something similar, but we want to extract the URLs from this page. So we're going to have a similar type of pattern here, but it's going to be a little bit different because we're extracting a little bit of a different content. So we're going to define a list, which we'll call URL list. Just like we had up here where we're storing all of the titles in a list, we're going to store all of the URLs we extract in this list here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Beautiful Soup, because Beautiful Soup is pretty good at kind of extracting HTML specific content, and we're going to use that to our advantage and then extract those links and then store them in this URL list. So I'm going to actually load the entire page into a variable called HTML page, and I'm going to do that using URL lib. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this equal to URL lib.request.url open and then self.url. So just to clarify what's going on here, if you notice up here, we imported both of these modules, and URL lib request is going to allow us to open a website. So much like Selenium allows us to open a website, but it's just going to be a little bit easier for us to extract the HTML content using Beautiful Soup. So that's why I'm using a separate library for this. So this is what we're going to be doing for this URL lib request is we're going to open a website, which is precisely this website that we defined by this URL here. And then we're going to load all of the HTML from that page. We're going to load all the HTML from that page into a variable, which we haven't done yet. All this line does here is it just opens up the URL as specified as a string. So again, this is a class variable that is the custom URL that we built. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say soup is equal to Beautiful Soup, and then we're going to pass in the HTML page, and then we're going to specify an optional argument here, which is LXML. The reason we do this is because if you don't, you're going to get warnings from Beautiful Soup. It's not necessary you have this extra argument, but it's just going to make the output a little bit cleaner so we don't get all of these warnings. So basically what we're doing here is we're passing in the request that we made up here into this constructor for Beautiful Soup, and then we're storing that information into this variable soup. So this is kind of what Beautiful Soup is going to do is it's going to take the HTML page that we've extracted from URL lib request and put it into the soup object, and the soup object that we created from Beautiful Soup has some nice functionality that we can extract certain elements that we're after. So we might want to extract certain elements with a given class, or we might want to extract all of the links. And the way that Beautiful Soup builds this soup variable for us will allow us to very easily extract that information. So it's worth figuring out what information we want to extract. So let's go back to the website here. So again, what we want to do is we want to extract the URL information for a given item. So let's go ahead and again click on this and say inspect. And what we really want to do is we want to extract the URL here. We want to get this href equals whatever this is, but we want to get all of these links, all of these ones on the same page. So let's do a little bit of sleuthing and think about how we can kind of generalize what content is present in all of these links that will allow us to easily extract this content from the links that we're after. Again, we want to get all of the links on the page. So if you notice in this element here, this href element, you'll notice there's a class. And it says class is equal to result-title HDR-LNK. So I wonder if that is present in all of the items. So let's go ahead and inspect this item too. So it looks like this class is also present here for this link. Indeed, if you click on this one as well, it looks like this class is equal to the same title here as well. So while the links change in each of these items because they of course redirect to different pages, this class variable that kind of is consistent among all of the items on the page is going to be useful for us because that's going to be kind of the one constant factor that we're going to manipulate in order for us to extract this content that we're after. So we're going to look for, now that we've superfied all of the HTML content that we got from this page, we're going to look for all of the elements with this class result title HDR LNK, and we're going to try to extract all of those and store them into a list. Let's go back to our code. So the way we can do that in Beautiful Soup is we can say, let's say for link in soup dot. So this, we're going to use the dot operator to access a function that Beautiful Soup provides to us, which is find all. And find all is going to allow us to find all of the tags in a specified set of HTML. So again, we've extracted all of the HTML here, and then we've kind of made it into a format that Beautiful Soup can easily extract and parse. So we want to find all of the links. So that would be A, that's specified by A. And then we want to find all of the links that have a given class. So we're going to say class, and then the class that we're after, the specific type of class that we're looking for on this page, is the one that has result-title HDR LNK. So what we're doing is we're looking for all of the links, which again is specified by this A. And we want to find within that link all of the elements that have the class result-title HDR LNK. And what we want to do in this line overall is we want to loop over all of those links that we can extract from this line here, from soup onward. We want to loop over all of those links. So if I just go ahead and say print LNK, let's see what we get. So I'm going to comment out this print or this extract post titles, and I'm going to go ahead and put in scraper dot extract post URLs. And let's see, so, okay, good. So I'm going to go ahead and save that and then run it. So again, what we should see is a browser open, navigate to the page, and then what we should see is something extract all of the links on the page. So the page is ready, and then we see all of this output here. So what we've done is we've looped through every one of the links that we were able to extract given the criteria that we gave to Beautiful Soup, and then we printed out each of those links in the loop that we defined. So that's what we're seeing here. So that seems to have worked as expected. So in addition to printing out the link, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add each of the links to a list because we may want to process them later. So I'm going to say url_list.append, and then I'm going to say link href. And then, so what is this doing? Well, if we access the href part of that, if we go back to the output, if I just go ahead and say exclamation point, that will give me back to this thing here. We notice that this is extracting a little bit too much, right? So we've got this whole A tag that we're extracting, but we don't necessarily want to extract the entire A tag in this case. We just want to get the part that corresponds to href. So for instance, in this case, we're just concerned about the actual link. So this part of this particular open and close A tag. We're only interested in this link here for this particular open and close A tag. We just want to extract the href parameter of this thing that we've extracted. So we're printing out a bit too much, but we're only concerned about this particular link here. That's what we want to store in our list. So in order to extract that content is we can access it like an array, and we can access the href part of that, and that's exactly what we're going to be storing in this URL list. So once we've done that, we're just going to go ahead and return our URL list, and that will be that. So let's just go ahead and print out, just to be clear, link of href, just so you can see that it does indeed extract just the URL part of the A tag that we extracted in this find all command here for Beautiful Soup. So I'm going to go ahead and write that, and for everything, just to make it all kind of come together, I'm going to comment this out. And another thing I'll probably also add in here, just to kind of make this a little bit more complete and maybe less annoying if you're running this a lot of times, is a function that will kill the browser once it's finished running. So we'll have a function here which is called quit, and this is part of the class, and all this is going to be responsible for doing is just closing the browser. So we'll say self.driver.close. Close is a function that's supported by this driver object that we defined from Selenium. So if we call this quit function that's defined as part of our class, it will just call this on the driver that we instantiated as part of our class, and we can call that finally down here. So we can say scraper.quit, and that will close the browser. So let's put it all together. Let's go ahead and clear the terminal so we have a nice fresh terminal, and then we'll say Python Craigslist scraper, and we'll see what output we get. So it's going to open up the browser, navigate to the URL. We should see some output here on the screen. So we see the titles there, and then we should see the URLs eventually pop up once the titles have been processed. So those are all the URLs. Notice it's just the URLs. That's all we're really after. And then that's that. So we notice that the browser also automatically closed as well. So that's pretty much it for this video. The code, as always, will be hosted on my GitHub link, and that will be in the description below. If you have any questions or comments or anything like that, please don't hesitate. If you found this content useful, please give the video a like and consider subscribing to the channel for more content. And if you want to see more content like this, please do let me know. So thanks again for watching, and have a great day. Bye.